put this slide in because if you were to use some of these slides for training with your own staff, you will have this as part of the introductions. And next slide. There are many ways to look at conflict resolution. One of them is from the position of a developmental model that starts with looking at how relationships develop. So if you think about walking into a class for the first time, walking into an organization for the first time, walking into any kind of situation where you don't know people for the first time, might be a work group, might be a group on Zoom. We start with beginnings, or as one model, the Tuckman model talks about forming. So we start with forming and beginnings. So I'll ask for just a couple of comments about what are beginnings or forming like. What are beginnings like for people? You can just shout it out. So one of the things that happens in beginnings is that we try to establish common ground. We often don't know what we're walking into, or we have some idea, but we're trying to figure it out. And so when you think about yourself in beginning, some folks are all about the joining, the I don't know what I'm getting into, but I'm into it all the way. Some folks kind of stand back and want to observe for a while. Forming is about common ground. The very second stage, whether it's a one-on-one engagement or a group engagement, is conflict. Or again, as Tuckman says, storming. And we're going to talk a lot about conflict today. One of the things that conflict does is that it helps to better define what the group is about, what the task is about. It often doesn't feel comfortable. It can feel really terrible, actually, at times. Conflict can be anything from a disagreement about ideals, and you may keep it to yourself. You might not even say anything out loud. You may be thinking, oh, I have nothing in common with this group. What am I doing here? I thought this was going to be worthwhile. Oh my gosh. Or it could be right out loud and in your face. But there's always conflict. And like I said, let's just hold that because we're going to talk about it a lot. After conflict, we can establish norms and move on to perform. The group matures, the relationship matures, and we cycle back into storming when issues come up about resources, when issues come up about change. And we work in a field that has constant change. When new people join, they go through these stages. So the group as a group may be in the middle of storming. The group as a group may be in the middle of performing. And new people come in and they are in the beginning. And we have to have ways of catching them up. And then finally, there's closure or transforming, which the caterpillar to butterfly image relates to, that we can transform. The group can become different, especially with new people, or the group may choose to take on a different piece of work. And so the mission may change, or the mission may expand, for example. Now, the congratulations on your failure sign, why the heck would I do that? Well, because when we can be helpful to one another in the midst of whatever is going on, we're in a place of performing. We're in a place that's mature enough to say, you know what? We are not always going to win. We're not always going to expand. Of course, we're going to have times when things don't work out. So let me pause for a moment to see if there are questions about the developmental model. Okay, next slide. What causes conflict? So I would appreciate it. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes, and I would like you to think about relationships and the workplace. And I'd like you to write a couple of comments under each of them about what causes conflict or a conflict that you've had. And I'll wait, I'll actually time you. So if you would please spend a couple of minutes just quietly writing. If we could stop the slideshow for a couple minutes. Thank you. Okay, I have different opinions, different work ethic, communication style, expectations, difference in morals, age differences, how to do something. Know it all. Racial communication, lack of compromise, and flexibility. No lack of clarity, lack of role clarity. Overstepping boundaries. Wow, great list. Any more? When people feel unsafe or threatened. Okay. Yep, just different mindsets. Yep, boundaries again. Different goals. Okay. Anybody else want to chime in? This is a great list, you all. It's really, really good. You know, I look at this list and I think, you know, this group may have had some conflicts, you know, they've sort of experienced that. All right. So if you would go to the next slide, thanks, Deanna. So the group actually listed almost exactly what the research says, right? The research says that especially in one-to-one relationships or family to family relationships, when we have differing opinions, lack of respect, misunderstanding, competition for resources, oppressive behaviors. And in the workplace, we could probably just copy the same list from the left, I think. But specifically, the research talks about differing opinions, resistance to change, unclear expectations about the job, about a task, poor communication, toxic work environment, and poor work habits. So I'm interested as you look at this list, if something comes to you or you have a comment you'd like to add. Okay. So if you could stop the slideshow, Deanna, if you could figure out their small groups, that would be helpful. Let me tell you. So what I'd like you to do is I would like you to think about and feel in your body. What do you feel in your body when you hear the word conflict? And what do you think about when you hear the word conflict? Okay, he just jumped down. Stress, misunderstanding, stress, big letters. So think about where you feel stress in your body. Tightening in the stomach. Yep. Tightening in the stomach. You get hungry. There you go. Some people get headaches. Yep, Elizabeth, headaches. What else happens? Internal fighting, increased blood pressure, body aches, loss of appetite. All right, so our body absolutely gives us cues. And one of the things that happens in terms of conflict is that we need to be able to bring ourselves back as well as we can to a non-anxious presence. So everybody take a deep breath. If you can put your feet flat on the floor, do that. Deep breath in, deep breath out. If you can raise and roll back your shoulders, do that. Bring yourself home to your body and let yourself come down a little bit. Come down from the tension. Next slide, please. Let's go back to the slideshow. We're going to move to talk about the capacity for responding and specific kinds of conflicts and how different kinds of conflicts require different responses. So, you know, one of the ways to respond is to say there's my way and your way, or there's my way and the highway, right? There's my way and there's no other way. So, one of the things we do to increase our capacity for responding is to breathe deep so that we can listen, because listening helps us to clear up any disparities in information. When we talked about communication skills the last time we were together, those of you who attended that one, we talked about constantly pausing. Just pause. You don't have to respond as though everything is a building on fire. Just pause. And in pausing, you can then, I often will say, would you say that again, please? So that I'm sure I get it clearly. And then I'll say, this is what I'm understanding. And I'll either paraphrase it back or in some way let the speaker know what I heard. Part of what we want to do is shift the focus from arguing to focusing on resolution. And to do that, we have to emphasize interests and even better, common ground rather than positions. One of the images I have for conflict, I have been part of all kinds of formal conflict processes, for example, labor management processes. I've been part of legal processes, sitting in when there is a lawsuit. I've been part of family disputes. One of the images that I often get is of people who have dug trenches and they're standing in the trenches and they are so committed to defending that trench, that position. And to get folks to step out and to look at the ground in a different way, instead of as a trench, to look at the fact that we're standing on ground that in fact is going to have some commonality somewhere. And so part of what I say to you is that sometimes with conflict, we need an unbiased neutral party. Could be someone else in the organization, could be someone that we bring in. I mean, however that works for you. But we want to increase our capacity for responding. Next slide. A couple of workshops ago, we talked about advocacy. And we talked about that with advocacy, there are often two main approaches. One's a bridge building approach, and one is an adversarial approach. And at different times, each are needed. What's important is to know which one you're in. Is this a time when what I need to do is to use my skills in such a way that I'm all about collaboration, that I'm all about holding the ambiguity in the system so that I keep saying it's not either or, folks, it's both and? Or is this a time when I actually need to negotiate, when I need to be more competitive? Am I working on a grant and I need to look at how I can best represent us? Am I in a situation where I need to stand up to bullying and I'm safe enough to do that? So we talked about these two approaches, and folks sort of considered, okay, where do I need to build my skills? Do I need to build them in the bridge building? Do I need to build them in the adversarial? And how do I know what I'm in? Next slide. And this comes from Thomas Kilmann. Two names, last names, Thomas and Kilmann, Kilmann. And the Thomas Kilmann model says that essentially there are 5 styles for conflict resolution. And we're going to go through each of these a couple of times. And the styles are measured on an assertiveness scale and a cooperativeness scale. So, for example, competing can be highly assertive. It can even move into aggressive. However, it's not cooperative. Whereas collaborating is highly assertive and highly cooperative. Avoiding is not assertive and it's not cooperative. It's a, I'm going to back up stance. Accommodating is not assertive and it's highly cooperative. I'm in this relationship, the task isn't so important. And then compromising is in the middle. We pull from any of the stances to think about how do we compromise? So let's talk about each of these styles. Next slide. If you haven't already, you can find the Thomas Kilmann Conflict Resolution Inventory. There is a free one online in several places, and there's also a more complete one that you can pay for and get all kinds of results back. But essentially, the inventory says we tend to have one style that we rely on the most heavily, and a second style that is like our backup. So avoidance, as I said, isn't assertive and it's not cooperative. You're sidestepping the conflict. You're not trying to resolve it. You're actually sidestepping it. Accommodation is not assertive and it is cooperative. You're trying to satisfy the other person's concerns, perhaps at the expense of your own concerns, but perhaps because you value the relationship, and at that point, their concerns are more important. Compromise, we'll come back to in a moment. Competition, assertive, not cooperative, right? You're wanting to satisfy your own concerns. That's just primary. It's most important. Collaboration, assertive and cooperative. So you're trying to satisfy both. You're trying to say, how do we both win? So the thing about compromise is, if you're wanting only what you want and you don't care what the other person wants and you compromise, you're going to feel like you lost. If you're collaborating and then you compromise, you're going to say to yourself, okay, win some, lose some. I won some of it. We both got some of what we wanted, not all of what we wanted. Next slide. So which style do we use when? So avoiding. I'll give you a chance just to read the screen. For those of you who maybe are calling in, avoiding, you avoid when it's a trivial issue, when you don't have any chance of getting what you want, when the risk of confrontation outweighs a resolution. Frankly, you avoid if you're in danger. You avoid if you're at any risk of being physically harmed. You may choose to avoid if you're at risk to be emotionally harmed. You decide there are other places to resolve the issue. You avoid. Now, when avoidance is your primary way of responding, people will feel like you're ignoring them, because in some respects you are. When I decide that I need to pull back, when I decide, okay, this isn't the time, there's a different place, a different time, I will say to people, I cannot do this right now. I will come back and talk to you about this. And if I can, I'll say like next week or even tomorrow. I cannot do it now. It may be that I avoid because I'm exhausted and I need to do it at a different time. Competing is the style to use when action is needed right now, right now. So the example I give a lot is if somebody needs to do CPR, or if somebody needs to um, bandage a wound, I don't want people to avoid. I don't want people to sort of say, well, let's talk about this while. It's like, you know what? Who does this best? Okay, please do it right now. And it may be that there are unpopular issues that are important, and there isn't necessarily a right way or the absolute most incredibly best way, but we have to make a decision now. And then accommodating. Well, if I don't really care where we go to eat tonight, it's fine with me for you to make that decision. If I don't care if we go for this grant or that grant, because you know what? It's not even in my department, or it's really important to you, I'm okay with it. Please make the decision. What bank favors means is I may decide to accommodate you because I figure I can come back to you later and say, you know what? You made the decision on what we were putting into that training program. I want to make the decision on what we're putting into this one. It's a transactional engagement. And frankly, when I'm in the wrong, when I'm stupendously, fabulously, just flat out wrong, yes, it's a really good time to accommodate. Next slide. Which style to use? Collaborating, right? When both sets of concerns, mine and yours, they're too important to be compromised. And it doesn't work. Staff will say things to me like, well, I went with this issue. It's really important to me, and it just got swept under the rug. Okay, so one of the ways to be more collaborative about that is to say, I am going to take this concern to the leadership team. I can tell, I know that there are these concerns as well. Well, okay, so both concerns need to be heard, and then the loop needs to be closed. And you come back and tell me that there was some response to it. We need insights from different perspectives. Really good time to collaborate. It's amazing to me how often people think, I can make this decision on your behalf. When we want to increase other people's commitments to solutions and actions, include them in the decision making. And finally, if we're going to do long-term issues, if we need to make a strategic plan, if we need to do a future search kind of exercise, we need to have as much input as we can get. And that is how we can collaborate on that. And finally, compromising. We'll compromise if the goals are moderately important. We'll compromise. Oh, wait, back. I'm still talking about it. Thanks. We'll compromise when there's two parties, but they're committed to very different goals. We'll compromise because it's quicker, it's expedient. Collaboration can take a long time, right? That's part of the downside of collaboration. When we're really taking everything into concern. I remember doing sessions where we were creating a contract, and I'm sure people thought we were going to do it in 3 months. It took us 14 months, right? Collaboration can take a long time, but we were all committed to being able to satisfy as much as we could each other's goals. And compromising is your backup for competing and collaborating. So once again, we're going to do small groups. And the issue this time is to talk about what you see as your primary means of doing conflict resolution. And as you're talking about that, to actually give an example of a conflict you were involved in. You want to actually share with people a conflict you were involved in, who was involved, and how it played out. Again, we're engaging in reflective practice to learn about ourselves and about conflict resolution. And again, we will take, let's take 12 minutes this time. Deanna, can you do that? That would be great. Are there questions about the assignment? Okay, into small groups, please.